Okay, so just want to touch on something that some of you may well have heard of. I'm pretty sure if you've been into a shoe shop in the last 20 years, I'm almost certain you will have. And that is overpronation and supination in shoes. Now, I thought we will go into this into a lot more detail later on in the course and the programme that you embark on. But I thought while I'm here with Colin, we're in a shoe shop, I thought what better chance we can touch on this myth, this idea of overpronation, corrective footwear, etc. And now I'm not going to get too much on my high horse and on my soapbox on this one, I promise. But I think it's really important for you as the runner, and also as the person going to shops online, etc. I think it's important, especially as there are some manufacturers out there that are still spouting this information that you should have a corrective footwear and that we overpronate or we don't, and therefore we need a certain type of footwear to correct this overpronation. So just before, Colin and I have a discussion about it, but what is overpronation? Well, pronation is a natural movement of the foot. We rely on pronation to propel us forwards. Our feet will naturally run from an out to inward motion. And some people will call that pronation. Yes, it is, but it's natural. And of course, there are some people out there that have pathology. That's an element of something not quite right within the foot, biomechanically or anatomically. And of course, in certain circumstances, they may need correcting. But you would never go to a shoe, you'd go to a healthcare professional for that correction. So Colin, just talking really there with the introduction, what's your thoughts on that really?
Yeah, like we mentioned previously, you just need to run as naturally as possible. And if people do pronate, as you say, that's how they dissipate their weight. Some manufacturers have now brought in shoes that offer a little bit of support, and it's more in the form of a dynamic support. So instead of the shoe actually having an insert or a medial post, something that's hard that stops their foot going over, they actually have something that is a little bit stiffer in the sole that actually facilitates their overpronation. I think the key thing when we're fitting shoes is if somebody has a biomechanical issue where they're overpronating, 9 times out of 10 it has nothing to do with their feet. Their biomechanics is generally to do with their hip, tightness in the hip, something that's going on with their knees, and then we would either prescribe, not prescribe, that's the wrong word, but actually send them to a health professional to actually have a look, see what was going on in the rest of their biomechanics and advise accordingly from there, rather than put somebody in an incorrect shoe making the system worse. How I put it as an analogy with a medial post to the old school style of shoe is that's like me pushing against a wall continually. It's stopping. The medial post on the shoe is stopping me from doing what I want to do naturally. Yep. All that's going to happen there is the body's going to get stronger in an incorrect form. Yeah. So we try and put people in something that just, again, that comfort word, something that's comfortable and just lets their foot do something, whatever they do naturally. Mm-hmm. I am very wary sometimes when people have come from a shoe that has a heavy stability, heavy support, and then all of a sudden you put them in something that is what is termed neutral. It can feel a little bit alien, and all of a sudden you're making too much of a change. Yeah, so something with a little bit of a guide, so they actually transition into something more natural, so they get away from their old school medial supportive shoe. Something that's more familiar. But that will take over time, that transition. It's always good for us to have some sort of referral process for a physio or anything like that, with some notes. This is what we've seen. This is what we think's happening. This is why they're getting medial knee pain. This is what you think you should do, and then they come back to and say, yeah, you were right, I'm doing these exercises, I'm doing this, but I still need a pair of running shoes. Yeah. Fine. That's where we go from there.
Fab. So Colin's touched on some key clinical points there actually, and that's something that we'll discuss in training, and that's load management in training and never changing something too quickly. And that applies to shoes. If you've been running in something that's heavily supported, let's take an Asics Kayano for instance, we know that's an incredibly heavily supported shoe, and you may well have been sold something like that if you were heavily overpronating. If you were to go from a shoe like that, something that was a really corrective shoe, to something very neutral, i.e. you're going from one very extreme to another, you are likely potentially to suffer some sort of discomforts, some potentially medial knee pain, etc. So we'd never recommend that. But it's all about what's comfortable, and this is where we always come in with this, and having a chat to someone who knows about the shoe and what you've come from and what to will make sure that you don't make that drastic change in shoes, and that's really key, what Colin's saying there. Also, what Colin touched on there is strength, stability around the hips, around the lower limb, and that's absolutely also critical from the glute down, and what your muscles are capable of doing, how their capacity to take load is really, really important. And again, when we look at shoes, the amount of correction a shoe is able to make to the intrinsic movement of the foot, so that's the movement within the soft tissues of the feet, is absolutely minimal. I mean, you know, you take a shoe from, for example, we've got here, that shoe's ability to correct what is a fundamental biomechanic and gait of us as human beings, it just isn't able to do such a thing. So realistically, we want to be looking at, if you've got problems, we want to be strengthening where there's a weakness, and therefore correcting things from a more functional way of looking at things. All right. Yeah. So it's great to hear Colin singing off the same hymn sheet, which is fantastic, and we will discuss this, I'm sure, all the way through. But again, like we've discussed already today, comfort's king. Just don't let yourself be sold a corrective shoe because you supposedly overpronate. It's unfortunately, it is still out there, but if you've got any doubt at all, seek advice from a healthcare professional, physiotherapist, if you've got pain and problems. But otherwise, pop into a local shop and just always question things, okay? Always question why you might be told certain things, and think about, if they're telling you that comfort's king, they're probably the right people. If they're telling you you overpronate and they do anything like a wet test, I'm not going to go into that now, run out the door as fast as you went in there. But we're going to cover lots of this, and I'm sure there's going to be plenty of opportunities to ask lots of questions, and we'll cover it as much as possible.